when I should have let myself but I couldn't have. Oh no, I couldn't have. I always open my gut when I shouldn't have. Oh no, I shouldn't have.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for allowing me to do this.
Yeah, of course.
I guess it's going to be a bit of a therapy session, right? You're on the books.
Oh no. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what I joke about with people. I don't work when I'm not getting paid, but I actually do. I work all the time when I'm not getting paid with like marketing and stuff and networking, but
And then
yeah.
mates will be like, "Oh, but what's your opinion on this?" And you're like, "Oh, for fuck's sake, I do this for a living, and now I got to do it for no money." You're like, oh, "This is
Yeah.
there's a boundary. We gotta reinforce the boundary."
Right, exactly. Yes, some people really like to take advantage of the boundary, but I think it's on me as the person, as the therapist to enforce those boundaries. And yeah, I think I
How,
do a pretty good job of doing so.
how do you do that?
How do I enforce the boundaries?
Yeah.
It's tough. I don't feel like I need to in my everyday life, like with my friends and family that are closest to me, they're not trying to take advantage of that. And they kind of, I don't know, they see me as like me outside of my role as a therapist because most of them have known me long before I became a therapist. Um, but I don't know. I think the way I do that is kind of limit interactions, like when it's happened before, create some healthy distance if it is somebody that I can tell is really trying to take advantage in that way, or just get therapy advice like regularly. I'll refer them to somebody. I'll say I do have referrals that I'm happy to give you, or it sounds like you might be a good fit for this support group. So I think that can be a good way to encourage that they seek support elsewhere.
Yeah. It's like, what's your advice on this? What do you think on this? Can you just have a look? Can we have a conversation? It's like, whoa, fuck.
Yeah.
You see it in the gym all the time. And then I also see folks, whether it's counseling, therapists, physios, something where we have to interact with people and we're trading time for money, in many ways. It's like I see it as well, and you're like, guys, this is their job, and now they're off the clock. And you want to benefit from their expertise. It's like, I don't want to say you got to get your wallet out and you got to pay somebody. It's a weird blurred line, right? You're like, yeah, you want to kind of give advice, but at the same time, you can't take the piss. And I think we've both fallen into the traps where we haven't enforced the line as much as we needed to. And like you said, you're constantly working. You can't switch your brain off. You're answering emails in the middle of the night, taking a pee. I've done that before. That's not good. That's really not good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you're passionate about what you do, it also feels exciting and invigorating to talk about it. So I think being mindful of that as well. Like sometimes I will talk with friends and they'll ask me about different theories or trainings that I'm doing, and that can feel, I get excited talking about that. So I think it's just like how it feels when you're interacting with that person. Does it feel like you're getting something, out of it, or like you're just giving? Because in my profession, like what I do every day, it's giving so much.
So why did you choose something that is such a giver?
Yeah. I think the typical like cliche response with like, why did you become a therapist? My own experience in therapy. So I just knew that, or I realized that I wanted to do something that I felt very passionate about. And I had always been interested in mental health, been passionate about mental health. And yeah, I think having gone through it myself and experiencing it firsthand, I just realized the significance of the role that a therapist can play in somebody's life. And I wanted to do something that was helping others in that way.
It is a beautiful profession, and it can really show folks objectively who they are. It's kind of like painting a picture and showing people, we can look in a mirror all we want, but we see what we want to see, right? That's body dysmorphia. They don't see what is there. They see what they want to see, or they see whatever the voice is telling them in their head. And like, I find just a simple conversation is so powerful. And now you're doing it with somebody who's trained, who's not just falling into these potholes and be like, oh, we struck some gold here. It's like, no, we're going down the journey together. There is a map, and it's so powerful, mate. It really is. It's something that I think we all don't respect enough.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think we I think we don't, especially growing up, teenage 20s.
Yeah. Like when you say you think we don't respect enough, just like the value of being witnessed by somebody else, being
Yeah.
validated, and yeah.
And like, I'm not like validating how somebody feels is huge, right? But
Mm-hmm.
also having the people around you that is going to be like, no, you're not allowed to sit in your own shit forever.
Right.
I had a simple conversation recently, and you're just out at the bar, you have a couple of drinks, and you're talking some shit with your mates, and you just look around, and they've got huge smiles on their faces, and you're developing relationships with maybe somebody in that, there's two circles and an intersection, and they're like, oh, hey, what's your name? And Daphne or Jack or whatever. Now you've got a new friend, and I think we're missing that. And I'm not encouraging everybody to go out to the bar or the pub and get wasted, and that's how you that's how you deal with things, right? There's other ways like gyms and therapy and groups and all that, but we need those places that pulls us together and makes us talk,
Yeah.
even if
Like
you're talking about
real
nothing.
connection.
Real
Yeah.
connection, real connection. Yeah,
Right.
rather than this thing.
Yeah. Getting off of our devices and into the wild, into the real world. There's nothing that can replace that human interaction.
Into the wild. How do we brave that wilderness?
How do we brave it? I think we expose ourselves to it. And I think it depends. Like for a lot of people, it comes naturally. Like for me, I guess because I work from home, I just really need to get out of my house. Um, yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's just exposure, like doing it again and again and again, and seeing the value of it.
Mm. And meeting new faces, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Forming new connections. That's important too, because we change and hopefully grow and evolve over time, and friendships will change. And I think forming new connections based on who you are today is,
Mm.
yeah, so important to just building a community that resonates with you and who you want to be, and surrounding yourself with people who are aligned with similar values and support you, uplift you.
That's a really beautiful point. Finding people who relate and want to be your friends of the person you are today,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being stuck in the person that you were 10 years ago, or 2 weeks ago, or whenever.
Yeah.
We kind of limit ourselves, right? We reach a ceiling which is 2 inches off the floor.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, we're supposed to change and kind of become a little bit different and try things. And
Right.
we do have such an aversion to change, right? We have this knee-jerk reaction. We're like, oh no, it's negative. I
Mm-hmm.
guess it's
It's
good in the
uncomfortable.
survival.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say? Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying it because it's uncomfortable. Change.
Yeah.
That's why we resist it, because it's uncomfortable and we like familiarity. So it's, I think, hard to see change as something positive, but that's how we grow. And with growth, we grieve, there's loss. Um, so it's uncomfortable.
How do we dance in that uncomfortable environment? How do we relish in it?
How do we relish in it? Oh, I think it depends on the person and what they need.
Mhm.
I know for me, if there's an area that I'm taking a risk in, that I'm doing something unfamiliar or different in, I need other areas in my life to be somewhat stable. And I read something like that somewhere a year ago. I think it was about more about like investing, which I'm not that very interested in, but I was trying to learn about it. And this guy made a great point of like, if you're taking a large risk in one area, like you need stability in all of these other areas. And I know for me, that's how I feel. Like if I'm putting myself out there and in some way or shaking things up in one area, then I need to feel grounded in other areas.
That's a really fantastic point. I'm just spinning through real world examples for myself as you're
Mm,
talking, and I'm like, you know what? There's a hell of a lot of truth in that. You know,
yeah,
I think we like to idealize these figures that can go all in, you know, jump in head first and fuck everything else. Let's go all in. I was like, well, most of us I don't think can do that because we
right.
freak out, right? So
Mhm.
having something that is the rock, the stable, the foundation, and we can essentially fall back on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with the salary, for example, the relationship, the environment, the house for a lot of folks, right? That some people aren't lucky enough to have a house. It's like, well, you have something to go back to. You know, that age old make your bed in the morning because even if it's a shit day, you can go back to a made bed. No, that's the foundation. It could be something so small like that, right? Your cat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it
We,
can be something small because sometimes we can't help it. Sometimes like multiple areas are on fire or, you know, there's crises in like all these different areas and we can't always control that. But I think, right, like having something to fall back on, going back to community, like that's huge. If you have community support to fall back on, then that can make the world of a difference if other areas are feeling really out of place.
takes a village, right?
It does.
You know, I think something that has really become apparent to me is that coming over here, the community spirit. And to be honest, I learned that from Pacifica. So from people from the island nations out in the Pacific. It's
Uh,
very community driven. It's very I am my brother's keeper. And we stand on the shoulder of the giants who come before us. And I'm going to care about the man and woman next to me and someone behind me and in front of me. And it seems like this band of brothers and sisters just kind of trying to figure it out and pull each other forward and push each other forward and call each other out on their own shit. Or maybe I've met the good folks that have taught me that, you know.
yeah.
But I think back and I've only got one experience, my own. So I can't create a stereotype from that or a rule. But I think back and it's like it very much was a dog eat dog, figure out it for yourself. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we end up molding a character, you know, late 20s, you should know who you are. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Or at least a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And then you kind of stick in that character. You know, we all die at 25, but we're buried at 70 type quote. And it's like, that's it. I'm solidified now. I am concrete when it's
Mm-hmm.
turned into rock. And I'm not sure about it. I think we've got to
Yeah.
open ourselves up so you can turn around and say, Al, you're being a dickhead. And I said, thank you very much.
Oh, being open to feedback. Yeah.
You open the feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I think we should always be growing and changing. Like I don't want to be the same person that I was a year ago. I'm not. I'm so different than who I was a year ago, 5 years ago. And I think that's like using our experiences too. Like as human beings, inevitably we're going to go through tragedy or trauma or grief, hardship, and you know, it's unfortunate. Like I don't want to go through any of that. I don't think anybody does, but I think we can take those experiences and be humbled by them and use them to become a better person.
Mm.
It's like life is our teacher, and yeah, that's why I think we should always be growing. If you're committed to your personal development, then yeah, you can absolutely strive for that and use those experiences to just become a better person.
Yeah, I remember learning to drive. Right, stay with me here. I go down rabbit holes, so if I just go off, like rein me back in. But I remember learning to drive. I mean, mom turn around and say, "Well, once you pass your test is when you actually start learning." Right, and I feel it's the same with life. Once you've kind of been half molded and kicked around a little bit from academia, and you're out trying to do your thing, you're paying rent, you got a house, you're doing whatever. You've kind of graduated, you've got the stamp, and you're out and into the wilderness alone. I feel like that's when you start actually learning what this thing is.
Right. Yeah. And the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. Like
Oh
the
yeah.
more, and I feel like that's true in my profession, especially the more I discover and learn, the more I realize I don't know. Um, but yeah, that makes complete sense. Like we're not prepared to, yeah, jump into the real world or life, and you learn through living, through doing.
Mhm. But isn't that exciting though?
Definitely can be. And it can be challenging too.
Yeah. I mean, we all go through those stints where everything we do turns out to be wrong, and you're like, God damn,
Right.
can I do anything right?
Yeah. It's like I'm done with learning lessons.
I would like a W on the board, please. I would like to come home with a win. But they're
Yeah.
out there. They're out
Mhm.
there. And I think I don't think it's binary either, right? It was a win or a loss. You know,
Right.
that's why I think sport is so good, because you could never play a perfect game. You can never do a perfect lift. You could never run a perfect race, because you can always get faster, stronger. You can always score more goals. You can always, the metrics keep going. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, you might have won, but there's ways to improve.
Right.
So it's not a binary W win tick. It's not a binary loss. Like there would have been good things within that race, within that game. And I think it's also the same for us, right? Whenever we
Yeah.
do a class or we speak to somebody who sits down on our couch and we have a conversation with them or whatever. So, well, they were good and bad and there were grey areas.
Mm-hmm.
But within that grey, there's a whole rainbow.
Yeah.
We need to be able to identify it.
Right. That's what I like to tell my clients a lot is, what is it? Practice makes progress. Like there's no
Oh,
such
yeah.
thing as perfection. Um, yeah, that like you can do everything you can and it's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be some better, potentially better outcome, but also not attaching like your worth or your identity to that outcome. Like it should be fun, right? Especially when you talk about sports, like
Mm,
that's a game. It should be fun. And
mm.
I know for a lot of people it gets to a point where it's not fun and it's like very serious and um yeah, there's a lot of like perfectionism and shame when they don't meet that potential or those expectations that they put on themselves.
Is life a game?
Is life a game?
Yeah.
Ooh, I guess it could be if you look at it that way. I don't know. I don't know all the answers though, but I think life is a teacher for sure, and
Mm.
we can use that to our advantage. Sometimes I like to think of life as a game. I think that can lighten things up a little bit and make us not, or help us to not take things so seriously, to not take ourselves so seriously.
Mm. Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that, and sometimes the fun is taking things seriously, you know,
Hmm.
but we can't also be married to the outcome. I think you made a really beautiful point. Progress, not perfection. and
Yeah.
perfection usually goes hand in hand into the sunset with shame,
Hmm.
right? And fuck it now, yeah, definitely fell for that vice many, many times,
Hmm.
many times because you can't stop and smell the roses.
Right.
You can't
I
give
think,
yourself a high five or a pat on the back or anything.
yeah, I think we all fall into that trap eventually, or we have before. Like, I feel like just in the society that we live in, there's always this like constant, this idea that we could be working harder, we could be making more money, we could be doing more. Um, it's so hard not to fall into that trap, like comparing ourselves to what other people are doing and feeling like we aren't enough or that we aren't doing enough.
Yeah, maybe that's why it's beneficial to think about it as a game, this whole life
Hmm.
thing. Because if we're just productivity machines, what's the point?
Right.
You
Sounds
know
pretty
what?
stale.
Exactly. And one day, whatever company would be like, actually, I'm gonna go get a non-organic thing to do this because it doesn't die within 70 years and its productivity doesn't wean off at the end of the week and it doesn't want to go to the bar and drink with its mates. It can work 24/7. It doesn't make sense. I think the stuff that we can't make sense of, the stuff that doesn't seem irrational nor logical, usually
Mhm.
emotion and feeling and the iffy diffy squishy stuff between people, right? Which even 10 years ago was looked at as bullshit.
Yeah.
I think that's where the beauty lies. I think that's where the answers lie too.
Yeah.
But again, I'm blonde, so I could be wrong. That's why I talk to people like yourself. You're much smarter than I am. It's like, tell me, am I onto something or am I talking on my ass?
I think you're smarter than you're giving yourself credit for.
Oh no.
But no, I think I really get what you're saying and I think that's something that it's so valuable, like slowing down and like we decide what gives our life meaning. And if you're deciding that, what gives your life purpose and meaning is connection at the bar with your mates, like that's something that you prioritize. If I decide that I find meaning on a walk with my dog and noticing the color of the grass, like
Mm.
that's something that I should really put a lot of value in because we get to decide what gives our life purpose and meaning. And I think slowing down is, for most of us, that's how we discover it. And
Yeah.
there's so much beauty in, yeah, like the things that we take for granted and the things that we miss because we're trying to do more or scrolling on our phones.
Yeah, looking at absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Looking at sunsets on our phones when there's a sunset right in front of us, or trying to take a picture of the sunset when, yeah, there's so much beauty to be witnessed right in front of us.
Mm. I had a really close friend of mine in Christchurch, and they did the mural in the old studio for this thing, and they were doing really well and did a mural in outside a mall and by a bank. I'm in a primary school and was working a lot. Really creative person. I remember we had a
Mhm.
conversation and he turned around and said, I'm kind of worried. I was like, oh, why? It's like, well, if I'm always busy, I got no time to create. To create, you kind of have to be bored.
Yeah.
And I had no idea at the time. I was probably still shut off. I was working all the time, and I was like, "You're talking out your ass, whatever." But I think back to that conversation. It must be uh, 2 years ago, maybe
Hmm.
coming up to 3 years ago, and I think back to that conversation a lot. And it puts me in check when I look at my diary, and I was like, "There's not a lot of space left on this paper. There's a lot to do this week." And I'm like, "Well, when am I going to write? When am I going to kind of sit and watch the sunset or the sunrise? Is my poison of choice?
Hmm.
When am I going to ponder and trying to figure out myself? Because you'll find if we load our schedule too much, then inevitably we get these emotions coming up, and because we've not addressed them or figured out what they are, we are snappy towards people,
Hmm.
and we deal with people. That's our job, and we can't do that because then that affects our livelihood.
Right.
So it's almost like you have to block out time to do nothing, but you're not doing nothing. It's just you're not running at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yeah. That like the importance of, or the question of like, can we just be with
Yeah.
ourselves? And what does that look like? Um, yeah, I think so many people like they don't even know how to just be. And there's so much power in like being with yourself.
What does that look like for you?
What you just said, like being bored.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not, I think we think of boredom as this negative emotion or thing, but creativity, there's space in boredom for creativity to come up or new thoughts or ideas or curiosities. So for me, just being, it's like I'm connected to myself, I'm connected to my body. I'm just like truly present. And sometimes that looks like just sitting and like observing.
Mm.
And other times it's just being present when I'm walking my dog or when I'm driving my car and I'm at a stoplight. And there's that, tendency to pick up my phone and scroll through something real quick, but not doing that. Like just, yeah, asking myself, like, can I just be in this moment right now?
Mm.
And what do I notice when I allow that?
I think a lot of people don't ask themselves questions anymore. And
Mhm.
when you try and have a conversation with somebody deeper than a surface level, like I don't know about yourself, but I can't have those surface level conversations. I can't talk about the weather every day of the week. It just
It's terrible. That's why I hate dating. Yes.
it's a ball ache. You're like, I'll sit on my own. In fact, I have a conversation this week. I was like, I would prefer to sit at a bar on my own and have a drink and just laugh about a joke I thought about 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, right? Because you're having a good time, and we don't. Life is a bit more than that. There is layers. There's layers around, and I find that
Mhm.
people don't know their own ideas, feelings, and thoughts, and they wait to what the status quo is, right? They're like, "Oh, I think that." I was like, "Do you?" Or are you just
Right.
regurgitating that information?
Right.
And I find that really scary.
Yeah. That people don't really know themselves
Oh yeah,
deeply. Yeah,
it's scary.
it is.
But
Yeah.
I find it, working with people and working with people in a strange environment as well, in a gym. And
Mhm.
even with kids, I find it with kids as well now. They're always on an iPad. So you have a conversation with them and they're awkward. They're like really socially awkward. Kids are socially awkward anyway. They're figuring out what the rules are, right?
Right.
But they don't know how to interact with you. And you're like, dude, I just asked you a question. You're supposed to
Yeah.
answer it. Like, how are you? Like they kind of look at you like, oh my God, it's a big person talking to me. You're like, um, what?
Yeah. But just like lacking in social skills that are so necessary.
Lacking in social skills, lacking in the feeling, lacking of being able to communicate said feeling.
Yeah.
And then we meet adults, both of us, because they'll come and see you as well,
Mhm.
that are the same. And you're like, oh wow, you're still a kid. Like you don't know what this thing is, this meat sack, and you also don't know what this thing is.
Right. Very like
Strange.
disembodied, disconnected to themselves. And yeah, I think childhood and what's modeled for people, that plays a huge role
Mm,
in, like what they internalize, like their parents' beliefs or what their parents tell them or caregivers. And um yeah, then in adulthood, like reenacting what they've witnessed in childhood
mm,
unconsciously, like just not even fully aware. um and that's something that we talk about in existential analysis, which is a theory I'm being trained in, is something called inner consent. And it's like you have to know yourself, you have to have self-awareness and inner knowledge to know what you're actually consenting to. Because so many of us are living lives on autopilot that we've just, found ourselves like in this job or in this relationship. And in this city, and did we actually choose it for ourselves, or was it something that kind of fell into our laps? Like, are we truly consenting to our lives or how we're living?
Wow. That is fascinating.
It's very powerful.
Also very true, right?
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
people end up in situations that they agreed to, but they didn't know what they were actually agreeing to?
Hmm.
They followed the current, they followed the trend. Like, what do you want? Oh, I want this. Okay, we'll go do that. It's like, no, for
Hmm.
fuck's sake, what do you want?
Yeah. Or like, that's what I'm supposed to do, so I'm gonna go do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a real difficult one. The biggest example we have of that is single moms. That's a really
Hmm.
difficult one. It's a really
Yeah.
difficult one. I'm supposed to do this. I've got to do that. Understood. Roger that. But we also need one slither of a time for you because the captain can't go down with the ship. The captain can sail any boat they want, but without it, we're fucked.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The ability to like check in with yourself and ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? What do I need based on how I'm feeling? Because, right, single moms, like they're prioritizing so many people other than themselves, so many things other than themselves.
Mhm. What are the three words you would tell your younger self?
My younger self,
Yeah,
only three words.
yeah.
It's hard. Um, my younger self, I'd say you'll be okay. Yeah. If I could
Why?
have four words, you'll figure it out.
Mm. Why?
Which, why? Well, my younger self needed to hear that. It was like just this paralyzing anxiety around the idea that I would never figure it out, and mainly career stuff, but I think just life. And I still don't have it all figured out. Like nobody does. Do we ever get to a point in our lives where we have it all figured out? I don't think so. I certainly hope not, because then life would be boring and
Yeah.
mundane. Um, but I think just like trusting that, I had what it took to make choices that would lead me to somewhere that I would be very grateful to be.
Mm. Yeah, we're all searching for that answer, right? Like the definitive line in the sand that we can pour concrete in and be like, I got it. I got the
Yeah.
metal rod. I got the answer. You're like, I don't think that's it. I don't think
Yeah.
that's it.
Hmm.
World's a big place. There's a lot of people to learn from out there.
Yeah. There are definitely a lot of people to learn from.
Yeah, and if you do fall into that trap of scrolling through social media or you get involved with the newspapers and the mainstream media and whatnot, like despite what they want you to believe, there are a lot of wonderful people out there. You
Hmm.
know, I think that's one of the biggest things that this thing has taught me. There are a lot of goodness out there, and coaching around the world. It's people
Yeah.
just want to have a good time. They want to see somebody smile.
Hmm.
And they want to be like, you know what? Yeah, it's not all that bad. Let's kind of figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't do it alone, and we shouldn't do it alone. And finding people who resonate and are aligned, that's everything. And right,
But
I love that you made that point of like, there are really good people out there, like good people exist.
yeah, you have to stay optimistic.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a little dark to live in these times sometimes.
It can be. Yeah.
Mate, this has been an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was so nice talking to you today.
You are always welcome back to talk a little bit of shit to a fellow blonde person.
Awesome. I would love to talk more shit sometime.
You have a wonderful day and we'll speak soon.
You too.
Thank
Okay,
you, man.
bye.
Bye, everybody.